This is the VOA Special English Health Report. Picture a huge public gathering, a sea of people, like the Hajj to Mecca, or an appearance by the Pope. Think of the World Cup, the Olympics, a political event, or a rock concert. When thousands or even millions of people get together, what do you suppose is the biggest health concern? Traditionally, doctors and public health officials were most concerned about the spread of infectious diseases, like influenza. Robert Steffen, a researcher in Switzerland, says infectious diseases are still a concern. But he says injuries and hot weather are bigger threats at so-called mass gatherings. Mr. Steffen is a professor of travel medicine at the University of Zurich. He is the lead author of one of several new papers about health problems at mass gatherings in the journal Lancet Infectious Diseases. Professor Steffen says children and older people have the highest risk of injury or other health problems at these events. He says children are more at risk of getting crushed in stampedes, while older people are at higher risk from extreme heat. Stampedes and cases of crushing at mass gatherings have caused an estimated 7,000 deaths over the past 30 years. The design of an area can play a part. There may be narrow passages or other choke points that too many people try to use at once. Professor Steffen says the mood of a crowd can also play a part. For instance, if fireworks are suddenly launched within a football stadium, people can get scared and try to escape. He says organizers of large gatherings need to avoid creating conditions that might lead to panic, stampedes, and heat stroke. And he says they must be ready to give medical care. So what advice does he have for people attending a large gathering? First, get any needed vaccinations before traveling. Then, stay away from any large mass of people as much as possible. Also, be careful with alcohol and drugs, which can increase the risk of injuries. And that's the VOA Special English Health Report, available at voaspecialenglish.com with MP3s, PDF files for e-readers, and podcasts. You could also find our programs on iTunes. Have you ever been in a huge crowd and worried about your safety? Or did you feel fine? Post a comment on our website and tell us about your experience. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. This is the VOA Special English Health Report. Tourists come to Zanzibar for its white sand beaches and historic buildings in Stone Town. But something else also makes its way to the Tanzanian island: heroin, trafficked across the Indian Ocean from Asia. Most of the heroin shipped through East Africa is headed for Europe and North America. But Rashad Abdul of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime says a lot of it stays on the continent. We know for a fact that heroin is being used in at least 30 countries in Africa. And we also know for a fact that the number of countries reporting injecting drug use, especially of heroin, is also increasing in Africa. The problem in Zanzibar has led to some creative local solutions. Suleiman Mali stopped using heroin 6 years ago. Now he operates a network of so-called sober houses. These are run by addicts themselves to help one another recover. There are 9 sober houses, 8 for men and 1 for women. Mr. Mali himself went through a drug treatment program in Kenya, but it cost around $2,000, he says. Staying in a sober house costs about $100 a month. Most of the people are supported by their families. Treatment is based on the idea that drug addiction is more of a public health problem than a crime. Mr. Mali says this is still a new idea to many people. Because addiction, it's a disease, and addicts need treatment. But people, they hear that addicts are bad people and they need punishment. He says in the sober houses, the addicts are in charge of nearly everything. It's a new method to Zanzibar. It's a new phenomenon to East Africa, whereby drug addicts take responsibility to run the system. This responsibility, he says, is important to building their belief in their own abilities. The men also learn woodworking as a way to earn money. Much of the program is based on the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. But it also includes art therapy, yoga, and even acupuncture. This is done by Kasim Nouni, a sober house counselor and former addict. He was trained by a volunteer from a Chinese medical school in Hawaii. It reduces tension and it's relaxing. It's a kind of treatment that's very effective for the recovering addicts. Still, he estimates that around 60% of those in the program return to heroin. Suleiman Mali hopes to expand the network in Zanzibar. His next goal is to send former addicts to work with heroin users in prisons. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. This is the VOA Special English Health Report. Officials in the United States say deadly abuse of painkillers and other prescription drugs has reached epidemic levels. More than 36,000 people died from drug overdoses in 2008, the latest year available. That was almost as many as from road crashes. More than half of the overdoses involve drugs that need a doctor's approval, and 3/4 of those deaths involved what are called opioid painkillers. These include drugs like methadone, morphine, hydrocodone, also known as Vicodin, and oxycodone or Oxycontin. Death rates from prescription drugs were highest among people 45 to 54 years old. A recent government report said painkiller deaths more than tripled in the past decade. They now top the number of heroin and cocaine deaths combined. The Obama administration released a plan last year to try to deal with the problem. Some abusers seek help at places like the Malibu Beach Recovery Center near Los Angeles. They learn yoga and other ways to deal with anxiety, stress, and pain. Joan Borston heads the center. She says stopping is difficult because In the case of pain pills, the body has stopped producing its natural defenses to pain, and users have to have more and more. Around the country, special drug courts work with addicts to get them counseling and treatment. Marianne Gunn is a retired drug court judge. She now appears on Last Shot with Judge Gunn, a TV program that shows the effect of drugs on users and their families. She says in 1999, the big problem was methamphetamine. And we have addressed that and are continuing to address that. And more over the years, we began to see people being addicted to prescription drugs. James Adams is a pharmacologist at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. He says millions of people live with pain, much of it from arthritis caused by obesity and aging. And it's a real tough problem for a doctor, because here you've got a patient with chronic pain, and these patients know exactly how to get what they want. And if that doctor doesn't give it to them, they just go to the next doctor. He says many patients may be able to manage their pain if they lose weight and get exercise and physical therapy. Another solution, California and many other states have registries. These tell doctors and pharmacists what potentially dangerous drugs their patients are already taking. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.